It all began in October 1939. The world was on the edge of war. And while nations clashed overseas, something equally explosive was happening in the pages of a comic book. A company called Timely Publications, the ancestor of what we now know as Marvel Comics, released a brand new magazine simply titled Marvel Comics, and inside was a story unlike anything the world had ever seen. Because this wasn't about a hero from mythology. It wasn't about a cowboy, a detective, or a soldier. It was about a man who burst into flames. Not a monster, not a demon, but a man of science, created by accident and doomed by fire. His name was Professor Phineas Horton, and he had built something extraordinary, a synthetic man, a living android made from artificial cells. He called it the Human Torch. But the moment Horton unveiled his creation to the world, the crowd screamed in terror. Because the moment air touched the android's skin, he ignited. His entire body erupted into flame. The press called it an abomination. Scientists feared it would burn the city to the ground. So Horton had no choice. He sealed his creation inside a glass chamber, buried beneath concrete, hoping to contain the fire. But destiny doesn't burn out so easily. Months later, during a construction accident, the glass chamber cracked. Air rushed in. And for the first time since his creation, the Human Torch awoke. Confused, afraid, and burning uncontrollably. He didn't want to hurt anyone, but everything he touched burst into flames. Cars exploded. Buildings burned. People ran screaming from the streets. To them, he was a monster. But to readers in 1939, he was something new. A being of science fiction brought to life. A tragic figure of power and pain. A symbol of mankind's fear of its own creation. In the comic, the Torch tried to douse his flames. He even dove into a swimming pool to end the chaos. But when he did, the water boiled away instantly. No matter what he did, he couldn't stop the fire. It was part of him now. And then, Horton's business partner saw opportunity. He wanted to capture the Torch, use him as a weapon. Soldiers and mobsters joined the hunt. They cornered him in a warehouse. Guns blazed. Bullets ripped through his flaming form. But the Torch fought back. Explosions rocked the night sky. The city burned red. Finally, surrounded and heartbroken, the Torch realized he couldn't live among humans. He flew into the night sky and vanished, choosing isolation over destruction. It was a tragic end for the first Marvel character ever printed. A hero born not from bravery, but from fear and misunderstanding. Yet, even in that chaos, something beautiful happened. Readers didn't see him as a monster. They saw him as a man cursed by his own power. A being trying to do the right thing in a world that didn't understand him. And that, right there, was the soul of Marvel storytelling. Because long before Spider-Man, before the X-Men, before Iron Man, Marvel's first character was already showing the world that heroes can be flawed, that power can be painful, and that even monsters can have a heart. But the story didn't end with fire. Because deep beneath the ocean, another legend was awakening. An enemy who would challenge the Torch. And later, the entire surface world itself. The Sub-Mariner. While the surface world was captivated by a man on fire, something ancient stirred beneath the sea. Deep in the Atlantic, where sunlight fades and silence reigns, an empire had existed for millennia. Atlantis. And its prince, Namor the Sub-Mariner. Half human, half Atlantean. All fury. He was Marvel's first antihero. A character who didn't want to save the world. He wanted to avenge it. You see, when Namor first appeared in Marvel Comics, he wasn't a savior of the seas. He was its wrath. He blamed the surface dwellers, humanity, for poisoning the oceans, killing marine life, and disturbing the peace of Atlantis. And when he rose to the surface, it wasn't for peace talks. It was war. Namor's first act? He attacked a group of divers, destroying their ships and leaving no survivors. To readers in 1939, this was shocking. Superheroes weren't supposed to kill. But Namor did. He was angry, proud, violent, and utterly unapologetic. In one of the earliest scenes, he emerged from the sea, standing tall against the skyline of New York. He looked up at the towering buildings, symbols of human progress, and saw only arrogance. He vowed to tear it all down. And he did. He lifted ships like toys. He smashed airplanes out of the sky. He flooded entire harbors. This wasn't a man saving the innocent. This was a force of nature reclaiming what humanity had taken. Namor's warpath made him one of the most terrifying characters in early comics. But here's what made him truly revolutionary. He wasn't evil. He was justified. Every time he destroyed a ship, it was because it carried weapons that polluted the ocean. Every time he fought the surface world, it was because they attacked first. For the first time, readers were forced to question who the real villain was. And that's what made Namor special. He was the first complex Marvel character. Not a clear hero, not a clear villain. Just a man torn between two worlds, land and sea. But Namor's rage wouldn't go unanswered. Because soon, he would meet the only being who could stand against his power. The Man of Fire. The Human Torch. Their first battle would become the stuff of legend. A clash that would define what Marvel storytelling would always be about. Power meeting consequence. Emotion meeting destruction. Two forces of nature, destined to collide. The Human Torch represented man's fear of his own creations, science gone too far. Namor represented nature's revenge, the planet striking back. And when they met, the world burned and drowned. The comic world had never seen anything like it. No capes, no saving the day. Just chaos and tragedy, painted like poetry. Readers loved it. Marvel Comics didn't just sell well, it exploded. Kids were talking about the Flaming Man and the Sea Prince across America. It was the dawn of something new. The Torch versus Namor was so iconic that it became the template for every great superhero rivalry that came after. Batman versus Joker. Professor X versus Magneto. Iron Man versus Captain America. It all started here, with fire and water. And even though they were enemies, readers sensed something deeper. Both wanted to protect humanity, in their own twisted ways. Both were victims of misunderstanding. Both were lonely gods walking among men. Their battle wasn't just a fight, it was a mirror. It showed us what happens when emotion meets power and no one wins. But this was only the beginning. Because behind these two legends, the Human Torch and Namor, a spark had been lit. A spark that would grow into the Marvel Universe. And it all started from that one fateful issue, a 0.10 comic book that dared to ask, what if heroes weren't perfect? It's hard to believe that everything started with a single comic in 1939. Just 64 pages, printed on cheap pulp paper, and sold for 10 cents. But inside Marvel Comics, something more powerful than any superhero was born. An idea. You see, before this comic, heroes were larger-than-life icons. Untouchable. Unreal. They were gods in capes who always did the right thing. Clean, flawless, predictable. But Timely Comics changed that. With the Human Torch, they gave us a hero who couldn't control his own powers. A man feared by everyone he wanted to protect. With Namor, they gave us an anti-hero who fought humanity for a cause he believed was right. And that, right there, was the DNA of Marvel storytelling. Flawed heroes, emotional stakes, conflict not just of fists, but of morality. That spark would later become the fire that fueled the Fantastic Four, the X-Men, and the Avengers. But back then, it was just two characters, a man of fire and a prince of water, burning across the pages of history. And the impact was instant. Marvel Comics sold nearly 80,000 copies in its first run, then went back for another 800,000 reprints. That was unheard of. The success turned heads across the industry. And suddenly, Timely Comics was no longer a small publisher. It was a rising empire. Soon after, editor Martin Goodman realized what he had on his hands. He told his team, "Keep giving them heroes with heart." And so began a golden age of creation. More characters followed. The Angel, Khazar, the Masked Raider, but none carried the same emotional depth as Namor and the Torch. They became the company's icons. And when World War II broke out, another name would join their ranks, a patriotic symbol created by Joe Simon and Jack Kirby, Captain America. By 1941, Marvel, then still called Timely, was dominating comic stands. And yet, If you looked closely, you could still see echoes of that first issue everywhere. Because every Marvel hero that came after, from Spider-Man's guilt to Hulk's rage to Iron Man's arrogance, they all trace their roots back to that one question. What if our greatest strength was also our greatest curse? That was the essence of Marvel Comics. It didn't give readers perfect heroes. It gave them humanity. And that's what made Marvel different. When other publishers wrote stories about power, Marvel wrote about the burden of power. When others gave you invincible warriors, Marvel gave you broken souls trying to do the right thing. And that philosophy shaped everything. It turned a small publisher in 1939 into the most beloved storytelling universe in the world. Even today, echoes of that first comic live on. The modern Human Torch, Johnny Storm of the Fantastic Four, was created as a tribute to Horton's android. The modern Namor still carries that same mix of arrogance and nobility, a king at war with his conscience. And every time a new Marvel movie hits theaters, every time fans cheer as heroes fall and rise again, it's all because of that first spark. That moment when one android caught fire and one prince declared war. Two forces that collided and, in doing so, ignited the Marvel Universe. So next time you see the Marvel logo blaze across the screen, remember this. It didn't start with a god from space or a super soldier. It started with a man who burned and refused to go out. Marvel Comics, the story that changed everything.